Hi, SLOconf. The next 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to talk about SLOs beyond production reporting. I want to talk about how we can automate delivery and also operational resiliency. So my name is Andy Grabner. I do work for Dynatrace. You can find me at GrabnerAndy. But really where my heart is right now is our open source project that we call Captain. So if you want to follow up on Captain, feel free to also check Captain Project and captain.sh. Now, the topic is obviously inspired in the work that I'm doing in my regular life, but I want to just in general talk about these concepts, SLOs beyond production reporting. So let me get into it. I assume that most of you are thinking of production when you think about SLOs. They're typically used in production to give you an overview of how is your system behaving. Are you meeting your application, your service level objectives? Whether these are, let's say, more business metrics like conversion rates and uptime and availability, whether these are more service-specific metrics or SLOs like performance, or whether it's maybe even technical metrics, the cost of running a particular service. When with cost, I mean, how many dependencies do you have to third-party services and how much does it cost you to call these, or the underlying memory, CPU, disk network utilization that your services have, because in the end, you want to make sure that your services are making you money and provide the business value. So SLOs, I think, are well defined and we know what we want to do with it. I also believe that SLOs are a great way to bridge the gap between DevOps and SRE. Now, you may wonder, why is there a gap? DevOps and SRE, there's no gap at all. Well, we may disagree on this, but here's my perspective on it. On the one side, I think DevOps engineers are automation engineers that are automating the speed of delivery. They want to make sure to increase deployment frequency and lead time for change. They're investing in their pipeline automation and really just make sure that features get out into production as fast as possible, supporting your business demand. On the other side, we have site reliability engineers that are making sure that the stuff that is coming in from the pipeline is not constantly breaking production. Therefore, they use automation to ensure the resiliency of operations, to manage change failure rate, and also in case something happens, through automation, as good as possible, obviously, restore services in no time, hopefully. What they really have in common, though, is, I think, making sure that together they're working on a single goal, which is ensuring the SLOs, ensuring that all the services are operating to what the expectations are from the business, from the end users, those obviously from your engineering team or whoever else you have as a stakeholder. Now, the question is, yes, we can use SLOs in production and the error budget to figure out, shall we allow something new into prod without violating our error budgets and therefore jeopardizing potentially SLA violations? But why not take a different approach? Why not start thinking about SLO-driven engineering? Now, what that means is, what if we take the SLOs that you have in production, that your SREs are looking forward and kind of also using as a gate, as a quality gate or as a gatekeeper before something happens in production? What if we take those and then shift them left, shift the concept left, shift left the definition of what are the key indicators that we should not violate? Because if your engineers know about it, that you are being judged and measured against uptime, response time, efficiency of the system, then the engineers, or let's say that way, the DevOps engineers that are providing the pipelines for engineering to push code changes faster out in production, they should know about them as well, because what they can then do, they can integrate SLOs as part of quality gates in the delivery cycle, meaning if they build pipelines and they're pushing new code changes through and they run some tests, you can then use, or they can then use the same SLIs and SLOs, pull the data out of your testing tools, your monitoring observability tools, and then let them be used as quality gates, so that in case developers are making a change and all of a sudden response time goes up by 20%, and you know if that goes up by 20%, it will eventually violate your SLA. Or if a code change is all of a sudden increasing the number of calls to an external service, which is very expensive maybe, then you can block it right away before later on running into any penalties. So the idea is very simple. The idea is take the SLOs that you know matter in production, but not just use them for production reporting or alerting or as kind of gatekeeper to let nothing in production. Use them already as part of your CI, of your CD, as quality gates. And this concept works, right? It works. You can integrate this into your existing pipelines like Christian has been doing. They have been using our reference implementation for this, which is part of our open source project Captain. They have their GitLab pipelines where they are building, deploying, and testing, and then verifying before it goes into production. But they really use this as a chance to evaluate how are the critical SLIs and SLOs doing, and if they're not met, then they stop and never even consider deploying in production. This is also fast feedback cycles. Now I want to talk about one more thing, because I think we can do one more thing. We can also use SLOs to drive closed-loop remediation. What that means, if you have an observability tool in production that alerts you on problems about an SLO, and hopefully then also gives you the root cause, then I assume you think about how can we automate the remediation. So this is another example of the reference implementation of Captain, where with Captain, we can trigger a remediation workflow where you can specify what actions should be triggered. Captain is then triggering these actions through an event bus. It's triggering an action. However, after every action, Captain looks at your SLOs and also your BLOs, we call them BLOs, business level objectives, to validate did this remediation action bring the system back to a healthy state. If not, the next action gets executed. After every action, we are reevaluating all of our SLIs and SLOs because we want to make sure that these remediation actions really truly bring the system back to a healthy state. In case this doesn't work, then obviously you can still escalate. But this, I think, is something we want to achieve. I know this might be scary for some if you do this type of automation, like scaling up, stopping a campaign, doing whatever it takes in an automated way the first time in production. This is why I believe we should also advocate and think about test-driven operations with SLOs. What that means, now speaking to the chaos engineers out there, the performance engineers and architects, use chaos engineering in your pre-production environments. Drive load, but also drive chaos. With this, you can test and validate your monitoring, your observability platform, your alerting, and then use this as a chance to define, refine, and test your auto remediation in a safe environment, in your chaos environment, in your test environment. But it's the same concept as before. Problem comes in, you execute an action and then validate, did this action bring the system back to a healthy state? This is a great way to really enforce what I like to call test-driven operations, because all of this is code that has to be tested. But in the end, we always do it to ensure that we're not jeopardizing and not violating our SLOs. Now, if you want to learn more, please join our conversation on Slack. Let's ask questions later on. We also have some additional materials. We're doing a couple of things, obviously, with our open source project here. But I think the idea in general is what matters. SLOs are great in production, but think beyond production. Think about quality gates in CI/CD. Think about test-driven operations. Think about auto remediation. Everything centered around SLOs. With this, thank you so much for listening. Hopefully this inspired a couple of new ideas. Bye-bye.